Welcome to this Prepare for IELTS video, in which we're going to show you how to tackle advantages plus disadvantages essays. We have a couple of strategies, so let's get going. Our first strategy we can call all ads and all disads, or all advantages and all disadvantages, and it looks something like this. So in your introduction, you might have a general comment on the topic, you might paraphrase the question, and you will include a thesis statement which indicates that the question is important, or a thesis statement which indicates your plan to answer it. Then in your first main body paragraph, you'll describe all the advantages. This will be a list paragraph, but you can support individual advantages, and then you'll do the same with disadvantages in the second main body paragraph. In your conclusion, you'll comment on the question, maybe with a consensus, or by giving an opinion which refers to advantages and disadvantages. You might make a general comment about your arguments or points. You might express a hope, wish, fear, worry, or prediction for the future. And this is a good option if you have several advantages and disadvantages, but you do not want to include too much support for each one. So if you can think of at least 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages, and maybe even more, then this approach really works. Let's see a couple of examples. The first essay: judges often prefer to sentence young offenders to community service. So rather than going to prison, youngsters who commit a crime might be made to pick up litter, do gardening, or work in residential homes for the elderly. What are the benefits and drawbacks of this approach? And this is a clear indicator that this is an advantages and disadvantages question. It's not asking for your opinion, it's asking you to describe and explain arguments on both sides. So let's have a look at this question. And one way to start is with a general comment about the topic. This is often a good idea, but you certainly can write a strong essay without this sentence or without this start. So if you're worried about your introduction being too long and not finishing the essay, then this is a luxury you can manage without. The second thing that you might do is paraphrase the question. Again, usually a good idea, but you can write a strong essay without this. And quite often you can combine these two things. So you can take information from the question and you can make a general comment about the topic, and you can then paraphrase the 2 sides which the question asks you to discuss. And something that you do need in your introduction is a thesis statement, and this can indicate that there are both pros and cons. So you can write that there clearly are advantages and disadvantages, or it can just indicate that you plan to write about them. In this essay, I will write about the benefits and drawbacks. You should not include your opinion in the thesis statement at this stage, possibly in the conclusion, but certainly not in the introduction. Moving on to the first main body paragraph, and starting with a short topic sentence at the beginning is a really good idea. So here we've got, judges are reluctant to lock youngsters up. This makes it very clear what this paragraph will be about. And in a way, this is a list paragraph because everything else will be an argument which supports this point. So we can support this topic sentence with a list of points, and you can provide support for some of these points. So you might just have 1 sentence describing a point. You might have 2 sentences where the second sentence explains the point in more detail, or maybe even gives evidence or an example. You can see that we're doing this with the rest of this paragraph. On to the second main paragraph, and starting with however is a great idea. It shows the reader that you have moved from advantages to disadvantages, but again, a very short topic sentence. Topic sentences are often simple sentences. You should write them in as few words as possible. And here we write, this approach certainly has its critics. We can see that now you're going to write from the other side. We can again include a list of points which include the topic sentence. And we can use linking words like furthermore and finally to help your reader follow your list. Don't use too many of these. I recommend no more than 3 and better only 2 of these linking words in a paragraph. You should try to use logic more often to connect your ideas. Your 2 main body paragraphs do not need to have exactly the same number of points or exactly the same number of sentences, but try to keep them quite close to each other. One long paragraph and one short paragraph is not a great idea. Moving on to the conclusion, and if you want to give your opinion in this type of essay, you can, but make sure it relates to both sides of the argument. So writing that one option is completely right is quite a bad idea because it makes the paragraph which you now disagree with seem redundant or unnecessary. So I would generally recommend a consensus opinion, an opinion which takes something from the advantages and the disadvantages. You can provide support for the opinion you give at the beginning of conclusions. And you can end the essay with a hope, a wish, or maybe a prediction, and this is usually a good idea for your final sentence. Let's have a look at another essay which follows the same format. In many parts of the world, citizens are allowed to vote in elections at the age of 18 or even 21. A few countries have lowered the age at which people can vote to 16. What are the advantages and disadvantages of giving the vote to those aged 16 and 17? You can see the question makes it clear again that this is advantages and disadvantages. So let's take a look. And again, we can start with a general comment about the general issue, but you do not need to include this. We can include sentences which both comment on the topic and paraphrase the question. And if you can include these, that can be a real strength. And you can see doing that means that we have a shorter paragraph for our introduction. And probably this length of introduction is about right. It's not too long, it's not too short. And we have a thesis statement. And if your thesis statement just gives your plan, make sure it's specific to the question. So don't write, I will discuss the benefits and drawbacks of this issue, because the examiner then thinks that you will write this sentence for every essay, and it doesn't really show that you have flexibility with your English. So make sure that your thesis statement is specific to the actual question. First main body paragraph, try to have a short topic sentence at the beginning of a main body paragraph. This one is quite long, but it is also quite clear. You can support your topic sentence with a list of points. And you can support some of your points with explanation or even evaluation. It's not necessary for you to support every single point. If you have 2 points, then you probably need to support both. If you have 3, you may only be able to support 1 or 2. It's not generally a good idea to have 4 points, to have 4 advantages or disadvantages, but if you do, there is probably no way you can support any of them. You probably just have 4 sentences, 1 for each advantage or disadvantages. Adding a sentence which summarizes the paragraph's main point can be a strength in a longer paragraph like this. Moving on, one strength of this topic sentence is that it strongly connects to the previous paragraph. So writing some of the assertions underlying these concerns can be challenged, and these concerns are clearly the concerns referred to in the previous paragraph. Any essay which links paragraphs is going to be a strong one. If you include more than 3 supporting points, then you'll need to write them very concisely. You won't be able to include very much support for each one. So you can see that happens in this case. And in the conclusion, if you give your opinion, make sure it supports both sides, as we previously said. An essay feels a bit strange if you write about advantages and disadvantages and then only consider one of those sides in your opinion. You don't need to give your opinion at the beginning of the conclusion. You can just write that this is a difficult question to evaluate, or you can write that both sides have merit. So the question doesn't ask for your opinion, and it may indeed be better just to give some balance at the beginning of your conclusion and say that both sides have merit. You can use a second sentence to explain why you may not completely support one side of the debate. This can be a good idea. And even if you want to show quite strong support for one side, try to avoid complete agreement. As I said, it doesn't make your essay seem very logical if you do that. On to our second strategy, and I have to say this is a strategy I don't think works for most candidates, so I'm only including this because some candidates say they like it, but it's not one I would use. So this is the long strategy of all ads and all disads, and it works a bit like this. So the introduction is quite similar, general comment on the topic, paraphrase the question, and a thesis statement which indicates that the question is important or that indicates your plan. Then, main paragraph 1, you describe and explain your first advantage. Then in the next paragraph, your second advantage. In the next paragraph, your first disadvantage. And in your fourth main paragraph, yes, your fourth main paragraph, your disadvantage number 2. You can probably see the problems here already, that your paragraphs are going to be short and you can easily run out of time. In your conclusion, you might comment on the question with a consensus or by giving an opinion which refers to advantages and disadvantages, or you might just comment on the question saying that it is difficult to evaluate or that both sides have some merit. You might make a general comment about your points, and you might express a hope, a wish, a fear, a worry, or a prediction. So this can work for stronger students with lots of ideas, but it can be dangerous if you substitute quantity for quality. So even strong candidates, if they try this strategy, they often end up writing quickly and include a lot, but the quality goes down. So I'll go through this very quickly. I'm not exactly recommending it for most people, but you might want to try it. Question: being educated in a foreign country has become increasingly popular over the last few decades. What are the main advantages and disadvantages of studying in a foreign country? So you can see this is clearly an advantages and disadvantages question. It's not asking for your opinion. So your introduction. So we can start by combining the general statement and a paraphrase of part of the question. This lets you write a more concise introduction. You can write 2 separate parts, a general comment about being educated abroad and a specific comment more about the question. And then we have our thesis statement, and you can indicate that the issue is important, that the issue is interesting, that the issue is relevant to many people, or that the issue is contentious, that lots of people disagree. So you can actually just comment on the question here. You could write that you plan to answer it, or that you will look at the advantages and disadvantages, but it's quite nice to comment on the question and say something about it at this stage. first main body paragraph. So if your topic sentence refers to people broadening their minds, then the rest of this paragraph should also refer to this issue. So using this strategy, you are not putting all of your advantages together. You are writing about two clear and separate advantages, which means you're going to have short paragraphs to deal with each advantage and each disadvantage. Because this essay has more main paragraphs, each one will probably include less support, so maybe even just 2 sentences per paragraph supporting the topic sentence. You can see in this paragraph something similar happens. So very short but well-structured paragraph. It's got a topic sentence, and the topic sentence is followed by support. Now we move on to the third main body paragraph, and starting with however shows the reader that you have moved from advantages to disadvantages. A really good idea. It's a quite basic word, but it helps the examiner so much to see that you've moved on to disadvantages. The support explains some of the problems living in an alien culture. So you've put forward an argument and you've supported it. And the final main body paragraph, another well-structured paragraph, clear topic sentence, and support. So these paragraphs are quite short, and the important thing to remember is that each refers to one point, so you can't start writing about a different advantage or disadvantage in this paragraph. Moving on to the conclusion, and you can start by stating that it's difficult to reach a decision or form an opinion, so you don't need to give an opinion. You can start by saying that the question is difficult to understand, or that many people have tried and failed to reach a solution or an understanding of this question, or it's important and we need to analyze it further. So giving an opinion is possible, but it might be easier just to comment on the question. If you do this, then you can restate the 2 positions. And you can suggest a factor which might determine whether the benefits or drawbacks are greater. And you can suggest that research is carried out so that the question can be answered. This is quite a nice way of ending many essays, to say that obviously we can't answer this at the moment, we need further research, we need experts to analyze this question further. So this is quite a dangerous way of writing an essay unless you are very confident and feel that you have got a lot of good language that you can get into these paragraphs. So I'm not saying it is my favorite way of writing an essay, and it's only something you should consider if you are a very strong and competent candidate. Moving on to our final strategy, and this is point by point, and I do quite like this approach. It's a little bit different. So you start with a general comment on the topic, maybe. You might paraphrase the question and a thesis statement which indicates the question is important or which indicates your plan. So you are commenting on the question or stating your plan. The same as in the previous examples we've given. Then in your first main body paragraph, you describe advantages and disadvantages connected to one area, one issue. You do the same in main paragraph 2, and maybe, though not necessarily, in main body paragraph 3. So if you can write 3 main body paragraphs and you have 3 areas that you want to analyze this question from, then you can do that. In the conclusion, you might comment on the question with a consensus, or you might give an opinion which refers to both the advantages and disadvantages, or you might explain that it's a complicated issue or an issue that's difficult to resolve or an important issue. And then you might make a general comment, and you might express a hope, a wish, a fear, a worry, or a prediction. So this is a difficult strategy for weaker candidates, and a strategy which only works if you have pros and cons, pluses and minus on specific areas. So let's look at an example. Just as the state provides schools for children, it should also provide free nurseries and creches so that young mothers and fathers could go back to work. What would be the benefits and drawbacks of this approach? Again, you can see this is clearly an advantages and disadvantages question, not looking for your opinion. So with the introduction, again, a general statement which can indicate that this is an important subject, that it affects many people, that it is new, or that it has existed for a long time. So indicating that this issue has affected people for a long time or that it has changed recently is quite a good way of starting your essay. After that, you can use 2 sentences to introduce the topic or question, and if you do that, move from a more general to a more specific one. So start with the more general topic, and so this might be the more general topic of education, and move to more specific issue connected directly to this question. And you can use the thesis statement to show that there are positive and negative sides to the issue, or to show that it's important. Don't give your opinion. Moving on to the main body, and this is the big difference here. You can see from the topic sentence, which makes it clear which issue you are going to consider first. And the topic sentence says, the first point worth considering relates to parents themselves. So this paragraph is going to discuss advantages and disadvantages related to parents. This is the first issue that we are going to consider. If you put a disadvantage before an advantage in this paragraph, then do the same in the other main body paragraphs. And ideally, try to make your advantage and disadvantage of similar length, but this is not vital, and the second or final point that you make will seem stronger than the first point you make, so can be a bit shorter. So here you can see that we have put a lot more information into one side than the other, which is not ideal, but if you don't do it in every paragraph, that's okay, and the second point that you make will seem stronger. Second paragraph, and again we have a topic sentence, and it makes it clear that we are going to discuss now a second issue, and this is the perspective of the infants themselves. So again, we describe a point and support it, and we focus on advantages and disadvantages, benefits or drawbacks to the child. You can get a very high grade with 2 main body paragraphs, and a third one is not necessary, but we have managed one here. And again, the topic sentence makes it clear about the issue, and this is society as a whole. Remember that all points in this paragraph must be connected to society. It's possible to include 2 advantages or 2 disadvantages, but they need to be related to the general topic of the paragraph. So this idea of balance is nice, but you can't always achieve it. You may have 1 advantage and 2 disadvantages in a particular paragraph. Actually, if you look at the 3 paragraphs altogether here, you will see there is quite a lot of balance. There is a very similar number of arguments, a similar number of sentences. So we have quite decent balance in this essay. You can start your conclusion by repeating that the idea that there are both pros and cons, so it's not necessary to include your opinion in this type of essay. It's perfectly okay to comment on the question, saying that it's difficult to answer, that there are both pros and cons, pluses and minuses. And then you might include a compromise or consensus suggestion, and this works well in this type of essay. So essentially, you suggest something which takes both the advantages and disadvantages into account. So here we suggest offering limited financial support to mothers and fathers who want to return to employment, and who struggle to pay for childcare. So this is something which can work within the advantages and disadvantages that we have considered. And finally, you can end with a hope that your suggestion will be implemented. So ending with a wish, a hope, a suggestion is a really good idea. So we hope now you feel quite confident tackling advantages and disadvantages questions. Essentially, you have two possible approaches, either putting all the advantages together and all the disadvantages together, or dealing with the issue point by point. We hope that next time you have to answer an advantages and disadvantages question, that you remember these strategies and you're able to use them. We look forward to seeing you, and thank you for watching.